This is Matthes. Hi.
Hi, this is René.
And we're going to show you something cool that we released on February 28th, which is the REST API for Enterprise Alert 2017.
Yeah, in update 1.
Update 1, exactly.
Update 1 it was, yeah.
And René is going to show you how it works in combination with Splunk. And yes,
yeah, so
your turn.
Let's go ahead. So as Matthes said, what we've done is we've added a REST endpoint to Enterprise Alert. So these HTTP general and basic stuff where we can manipulate records in a database through HTTP methods like get and post and update and delete and stuff. And what we've done is we've added a handler for posting events to our events database table so that we can actually trigger alerts from these events coming from systems like Splunk, as we said. So what we want to look at in Splunk is how we've actually configured an alert and how we can actually send to the Enterprise Alert endpoint. So in Splunk, what we've done is we've created actually a data source so that we are able to send data to Splunk. And when new data arrives in Splunk, then it triggers actually a call to our REST endpoint. And we will trigger this call to our endpoint from a data input that is a HTTP listener itself. Yeah? So the idea is that we call an HTTP endpoint from Splunk, and then Splunk will actually call our REST endpoint to trigger an alert to a mobile device or someone on call in after hours. So here we can see in Splunk a list of inputs that allows us to add data to our Splunk instance, and we can see an HTTP collector here. So that's the inbound path, right? So I have something else sitting here on this laptop that will actually invoke this HTTP event endpoint that we can see on this screen here. So that's actually our inbound path, and what we've done is we've created a search query in Splunk that queries for the HTTP events that came in through the source that you have seen on the previous screen. So under search and reporting, there is options to actually search the data from this HTTP source. And then what we've also done is we've created an alert for new events that come in through this HTTP source. So when we click here under alerts, then you can see this predefined alert. I named it IoT device alert, and then you can see we can open the search that's behind the alert. Whenever there's search results returned from that search query here that we can see, then Splunk will fire our REST or will actually touch our REST endpoint that we've added to Enterprise Alert. And we can see that here in the definition and the details of this alert. So when we click here on edit, we can say edit this alert, and then under actions you can see the webhook that we should actually see here. So here you can see there is this URL of our Enterprise Alert web service, and there is a new endpoint or a new handler that's called REST, and then there is an events endpoint, and when we simply let Splunk post to this handler providing an API authorization key, then we will get this data in Enterprise Alert.
Well, cool. So this has to be like a public endpoint to the internet.
Yeah,
so
this needs to be reachable by Splunk, but Splunk can sit in the cloud or in your on-premises data center.
So it can be within your walled garden on-prem. If both products are on-prem, or if Splunk is outside, Enterprise Alert is on-prem, then you need to have like a
forwarding proxy, like a port open, and then you can route it to the server.
I see. And vice versa is if Enterprise Alert is in, let's say, runs on Azure and Splunk is on site, then it is no issue.
You will
right?
actually, then Splunk will post to the internet to some cool. Azure endpoint, and then it's routed to the REST service of Enterprise Alert.
Okay, so let's try it out.
So I guess we should first of all check how we can actually set this up in Enterprise Alert.
Good.
So the endpoint needs to be created there, and this is new stuff, right? So everyone who's familiar with Enterprise Alert so far, this is, I guess, what you have not seen. so far, because in our event sources, when we click here on the system, event sources, then you can see I have created a new tile here. Yeah, that's a new source that we can create in Enterprise Alert. Update 1 for 2017. This is new. And we can explore actually the one that I've created, or I will also show you how you can set it up from scratch. So here under details, you can see the configuration for the endpoint that Splunk will send data to. Yeah, it's relatively easy. You just have to enter a name for the system that is sending data to that endpoint. In our case, it's Splunk. And then you can see there is an API key that is generated for your convenience automatically. And this is what you somehow need to pass along with your request, either as a query parameter to the URL that you post to, or you add it in a basic authentication header to your HTTP request. But most tools, and this is interesting to understand when we go back to Splunk, do not really let us configure HTTP headers here and enter access credentials, right? Like API keys from Enterprise Alert. And this is why we've made it super easy for you and added the capability to simply provide it as a query parameter, like a query param. It's called API key. And then you see the key that is entered here. It matches the one that we can see here in the configuration section as API key. Yeah,
and this key is generated by Enterprise Alert.
It's generated automatically when we create the source. We can see that in a few moments, or we can recreate it by clicking on Generate New and copying it to the clipboard and pasting it here. Under as query param to that URL that points to our Enterprise Alert REST API. Yeah, but this is how authentication to that endpoint works. And other than that, there is some mapping that we can define. Yeah, so there is some schema and data that is sent by Splunk in JSON format. And what we want to do in Enterprise Alert, we want to work with that, right? We want to create policies that can work with conditions for these parameters and also embed values in the notifications that we send. And this is what we configure here. So the parameters that are interesting for us that we want to digest further in Enterprise Alert for determining where to send it to, what is the responsible team, or is it critical enough to send a notification. This is what we can extract and work with the parameters here. And we can see here there's a status parameter coming from Splunk and a actual message and also I believe a severity. Yeah, this is what we can see here. And these parameters are relevant for me. All the others is what I could actually delete here from the mapping. And these parameters are populated and I would say pre-provisioned in the Enterprise Alert system automatically when we create the source. And this is
well, I think the key is that these parameters are basically coming from Splunk. So Splunk doesn't have to fit any format that we provide. So we can digest any format, any data coming from any source. So there is no restriction of how the format has to look, or if there has to be some kind of wrapper, or you find that sometimes you post something into some data analytics tool, has to be in a specific format. So we don't expect that, right?
That's correct.
It can be anything, any XML, JSON payload. We can digest, right?
There is no fixed schema expected by our endpoint.
That's pretty cool.
That allows you to connect any system that works with with its own schema. And here you define actually what you want to take from these data from these systems, and we are thereby pretty flexible actually, and it's super easy thereby.
I see. And if the parameters change in between, what happens? You set the source up, and then something changed in the Splunk side, so they add a parameter or they have a different event. What happens then? Can we still work with it? Can we?
Yeah. You can actually click here on add parameters from last event. And then if the last event that came in from that source contained a additional one that we haven't seen so far, then it would show up here. And then you can work with it in policies or embed it in the alert notifications. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Or if you connect a totally different systems, like some stuff from VMware or these kind of systems, then you would actually add a additional source here. You would click on event sources and then click on new source. Yeah. like new source, and then you select, and this is also a new list item that shows up here. With update 1, it's called a REST API client. You would enter the name like VMware. And then here you can see there is no event parameter showing up because we haven't received any HTTP post from the system yet. But this will change once you've sent the first request to it. So that's the general idea here.
And then with all the parameters that come in, you can work in the alert policies.
Exactly.
So you can,
exactly, and
evaluate any parameter that is sent into Enterprise Alert.
I suggest we have a look at the policy that will trigger when I post data to my Splunk data source.
Cool.
That then triggers the alert rule that we have seen here in Splunk. And but first of all, let's check if that route works. And
okay, cool. Yeah,
So we have the alert, and we can send HTTP data from an IoT device to Splunk by making an HTTP request to Splunk, and then that will invoke our endpoint. Okay. So let's actually do that from this other system here. And now we need to bring the phone to the screen. So here we can see it triggered already. So everything worked, right? So I've posted data. Yeah, it's real time, right? So one typical characteristic of Enterprise Alert. So real time performance. And we can see here this in-app push notification that was sent to my app. So I am responsible for looking at these kind of incidents, and I can now provide my feedback, responses, do an acknowledgement to confirm that I have understood what's going on here. And
so you're the one from your team to take over, but you have a backup.
For these kind of, so actually there is a backup person, Doreen, today. And but here, this is data that actually was coming from Splunk, right? So we can actually see these parameters that we have seen in the event source. And I have not deselected them to be shown in the app. But
so it's all that is coming from Splunk right now. But you can kind of adapt it, and
I can adapt it and add other text here. But you can see I work with the message, the status, and the severity in my policy. Yeah. We can see the policy. I'll open it.
Okay.
In a few moments. But let's first of all acknowledge to prevent that Doreen is nagged and alerted here. And then let's actually check back in Splunk maybe. A search for
to see the
data item that to prove that this was real stuff that we've triggered here. So when we click under alerts and then open and search, then I've looked with too many log analytics tools. Anyway, but it's in here.
Okay, good. So
it's in here. So the
somewhere lost in the big data lake.
It's in there.
It's lost in the big data lake, right?
And now maybe the system which we know better what to do.
So we are the experts for Enterprise Alert, not for Splunk, as you can see. Right?
We don't do Splunk too often. But at least when we click here on the event sources, we should see our alerts here. Under incoming events. Yeah. And then we can see that we've indeed triggered policies from our data that came in through that new REST API endpoint that we named Splunk, right? So this is the event source that is showing up here. And there's the policy that has triggered that I named IoT device errors. So we can click it. And then we can see that we parse or work with the data coming in through the Splunk source here on this first tab, and then under conditions, we say it must be super urgent, what is coming from Splunk and stuff, and filter on the data source and maybe on the device, so we can work with the data that Splunk sends to Enterprise.
And then the typical stuff, duplicate suppression, wait for recovery.
Making sure that it's no noise.
Exactly, very good.
We don't want to wake people up in the night when it's not necessary to do so.
And then in the message you can reuse all parameters, I guess.
Exactly. So we selected here a target team. That's just a sample team, and then in the message we've embedded, the data here, as you can see, like message colon and stuff. And we have not deselected any of the parameters here to be hidden in the app details. So that's why everything showed up there. as we've browsed the alert details in the mobile app. But that's it, actually. It's straightforward
Fantastic.
stuff.
So that's very simple. That's very easy. That is multi-system enabled, so you can connect as many different sources via REST as you want.
Exactly.
Right.
Each system with its own
OMS,
schema.
Microsoft Azure, Monitor,
Everything
VMware,
that talks
anything
HTTP REST and can send
fantastic.
JSON data or XML data or even plain text. Yeah,
Okay.
so there's even more flexibility coming with the
Well,
endpoint.
that's cool.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
it's
Fantastic.
Cool stuff. And this is what I wanted to show as well. The documentation or specification that you can read is provided here in an HTML format as well. So it's a Swagger UI link that we provide in the details of these REST API client sources. And when you click this link, then in your Enterprise Alert instance or environment, it will open a new browser tab. And then you can browse the Swagger UI, or how they call it today, Open API spec or so, definition. Yeah, so there's this Swagger file that describes our API that will be returned in HTTP requests to this URL here. And here you can then browse all the endpoints available, right? What we have used here is the post to the events handler. Yeah, This is what Splunk called. But it will return also then reference IDs that you can use to then get updates to this event that you've sent to Enterprise Alert. When you specify this ID here in a GET request to that REST API. So there's more stuff that you can actually do, like modifying it or like resetting the alerts that the policy has triggered. If you work with that ID that we return when you post the data to our endpoint and then you call this reset handler, then this will stop notifications because it tells Enterprise Alert that the problem does no longer persist in Splunk or it
makes sense. Closed,
perfect.
Very
good.
Good.
This is functionality that you may know already from Enterprise Alert's other web service,
like the command line
SOAP and stuff and command line. But this is where you can work with the details, and you can even pass your own IDs when posting to the first handler here to create the data in Enterprise Alert if you have your reference IDs in the source system already. And so again, super flexible. And
so it's time to update.
It's time to update and work with it and connecting additional systems to your Enterprise Alert environment.
Cool stuff.
Yeah.
So thanks, René. Thanks for showing, and thanks for listening and watching, and see you soon again.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.